Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm sure we've all noticed it. The grocery bill is looking a little different these
Yeah, a
days.
little intense.
A little intense, right? Prices are up. And what's funny is that I think we're experiencing it so differently depending on what generation we're a part of.
I think so too.
So today we're doing a deep dive into what we're calling the generational grocery gap.
I love that.
How Gen Z and Gen X are navigating this wild world of rising food costs.
So,
You got a whole stack of articles and data here. We're going to try to break it all down for you. So you can kind of understand what's happening.
yeah, and what's interesting is that we're not just talking about, like a local thing happening with prices. This is a global phenomenon,
Right.
this food price inflation. And as we're seeing these ripple effects from the pandemic. I mean, the supply chains are really struggling to catch up still.
Yeah, they haven't got away, have they? And then on top of that, you've got like the conflict in Ukraine adding fuel to the fire.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there. I mean, you really have to think about the impact of climate change.
Oh, yeah.
Right. All the extreme weather we're seeing, droughts, floods, you name it, it's wreaking havoc on crops and transportation.
Absolutely.
It's this whole domino effect.
Okay, so we've got pandemic hangovers, we've got geopolitical instability, we've got climate change.
Yeah.
Not exactly a recipe for a stable grocery bill.
No, not at all. And then you layer on top of that, the widespread labor shortages that are driving up wages.
Right.
And then the energy crisis that's impacting the cost of everything. And ultimately, all of that gets passed down to the consumer.
Yeah, so let's bring this down to earth. What does this actually look like in the grocery store? I mean, we're seeing some serious sticker shock on everyday staples.
Oh, for sure.
Eggs, dairy, meat.
Absolutely. Things that are likely to be in both Gen Z and Gen X's shopping carts.
Right. And produce.
Oh my gosh.
It feels like lettuce is playing roulette with the price these days.
I know. You go in one week, it's one price. You go in the next, it's another.
Yeah.
The price volatility of fresh produce, I think, is such a great example of how these global factors that we're talking about are directly hitting our wallets.
Yeah.
And then it's sort of like, okay, so we're all experiencing this, but how are these two very different generations coping with these rising costs?
Yeah.
That's what I think is so interesting because they are facing the same economic realities, but their reactions and approaches to it are very different.
Yeah, and it's so interesting too because you've got Gen Z where a lot of them are just starting to manage their own finances.
Yeah.
Right? So they might be in those extensive cities. They might be dealing with student loan debt. They're working maybe part-time jobs. They're just starting out in their career.
Absolutely. And that means even a small increase in food prices can have a much bigger impact on their overall budget compared to someone who's, further along in their career.
For sure. But what's interesting about Gen Z, though?
Wait.
They're incredibly tech savvy.
They are. So they've got online grocery shopping, they've got delivery services, they're using apps to compare prices. I mean, there's even apps specifically designed to track inflation.
Wow.
And help find the best deals. It's like their secret weapon in the battle against rising prices.
I don't know if I'd call it a secret weapon, but you're right. I mean, they've grown up with technology
Yeah,
at their fingertips. It's second nature.
totally.
And I think that tech savviness is really, driven by that need to stretch their budget,
Right.
as far as possible. But it's not just about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's this whole other layer to Gen Z and how they're approaching food.
Yeah. It's not just about finding the cheapest option. Gen Z is also incredibly passionate about healthy and sustainable food,
Oh, yeah.
right? They want organic, they
Exactly.
want plant-based, they want ethically sourced, all the buzzwords.
All the things.
But let's be real, those choices often come with a higher price tag. Right. So it's like this double whammy. They're dealing with the general food price inflation, but then on top of that, they're choosing these options that already have this premium cost associated with them.
Right.
So it raises the question, do they have to compromise their values to make ends meet?
Totally. And then you add the social media factor.
Oh, yeah.
You can't talk about Gen Z without talking about TikTok,
No.
without talking about Instagram. One viral video lamenting the price of avocados.
Right.
Suddenly it's a meme. Everyone's talking about it.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating how they use social media not just to vent their frustrations,
Yeah.
but also to crowdsource solutions and find deals. And I think it really speaks to their desire to be informed and connected. And it also highlights their awareness of the systemic issues at play here. They're not just passively accepting these price hikes.
Yeah.
They're really trying to understand the why behind it.
Yeah. And so it's not all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
I think Gen Z might be facing an uphill battle, but they're tackling it with their phones in hand and a healthy dose of ingenuity.
I love that.
Right. So we're seeing a lot of DIY solutions. So things like meal prepping, cooking more at home, even urban gardening. It's like
Yes.
they're hacking the system with creativity and resourcefulness.
Yeah, they're really impressive in that way. Their ingenuity, I mean, they're not afraid to try new things, to really break the mold and find those unconventional ways to get what they need.
Yeah.
But it's worth noting that that resourcefulness could also be born out of necessity. It's a
Yeah.
reflection of these economic pressures that they face.
Yeah, okay, so we've got Gen Z using tech, using DIY, using social media to navigate this grocery maze.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears to Gen X.
Okay.
Now, these guys, they've weathered their fair share of economic storms, haven't they?
They have.
I mean, they've lived through recessions. They saw that sky-high inflation of the early 80s.
Absolutely. And I think that experience is shaping how they're viewing this current situation. Oh, yeah. For them, this might feel like just another cycle, even if it is a little bit more intense than what they've seen before.
Like, been there, done that, got the T-shirt.
Exactly.
Right.
But, it's important to remember, Gen X isn't a monolith.
Of course.
While they might share some common experiences, their individual situations are going to vary widely.
For sure. For sure. And we can't forget a lot of Gen Xers, they're in the thick of raising families right now.
Absolutely.
So they're juggling mortgages, they're juggling car payments, maybe even college tuition,
Yes.
all at the same time.
Right. So these rising food prices are just adding this other layer of pressure to their already stretched budgets.
Right.
And it's not that they're not concerned about it, but their approach might be more about just, finding a sense of stability
Sure.
in the face of all this uncertainty.
Okay, so how are they coping then? What's in the toolbox for them?
I think their approach tends to be less about tech and more about those tried and true methods.
Okay.
So things like couponing bulk buying at warehouse clubs.
Hunting for in-store sales.
Right. It's
Yeah.
about maximizing value,
Yeah.
stretching every dollar as far as it can go.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And you see this real strong focus on practicality.
Yeah.
Remember that Gen Z idealism we talked about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Gen X is all about pragmatism.
Okay.
They're looking for the best bang for their buck.
So instead of premium organic produce, they might be opting for frozen veggies when the price is right,
Right.
or choosing store brands over name brands.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're making these very calculated choices, finding ways to kind of maintain their lifestyle
Right.
and provide for their families within the constraints of this new economic reality.
Yeah. It is really interesting to see these two generations facing the same issue,
I know.
but going about it in such different ways.
I think it really highlights how much our experiences shape how we respond to things.
Yeah.
And how each generation really brings their own unique perspective and set of tools to the table.
It makes you wonder, are these differences simply a reflection of their life stages, or are there deeper cultural and social factors at play?
It's a great question, and one we're going to keep exploring as we dig deeper into this generational grocery gap. We'll be right back after a quick message to unpack these ideas even further. Stay with us.
It's fascinating to think about, how these different approaches, like while they might be effective in the short term, could have these long-term consequences.
Oh, interesting.
For example, Gen Z's reliance on delivery services and those convenience apps could actually lead to like a disconnect
Okay.
from the realities of food production and distribution.
That's a really good point. Because
Mhm.
if you're only ever interacting with food through a screen, do you even know where it comes from?
Right.
Like the labor involved, the environmental impact.
Exactly. And on the flip side, Gen X, while their focus on bargain hunting and stretching their budget is really admirable,
Yeah.
it could also, lead to a sense of resignation, like a feeling that they just have no choice but to accept these rising prices.
So instead of like pushing for some kind of systemic change, they're just like, I got to survive.
Exactly. They're just trying to survive within a system that might not be working for them.
Yeah.
And it really raises these questions about how these different coping mechanisms that each generation is using might be shaping not just their individual experiences,
Right.
but also their broader worldviews.
It makes you wonder if this generational grocery gap that we're talking about is really just a symptom of like a larger societal divide.
Ooh, that's a great observation.
Yeah.
Are these differences really just about grocery shopping, or are they a reflection of like these deeper economic anxieties, differing levels of trust in institutions and just contrasting visions for the future?
Right. So we've got Gen Z, perhaps unknowingly becoming more disconnected
Yeah.
from where their food comes from, and Gen X potentially feeling trapped in a system
Right.
that feels rigged against them.
And, we can't forget about the emotional toll that all of this is taking.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, Gen Z might be masking those anxieties with, technology and humor.
Yeah.
And Gen X could be suppressing their frustrations with stoicism and pragmatism.
It's not just dollars and cents, right? It's like people's well-being,
Absolutely.
sense of security,
Yeah.
hope for the future.
It really is. And, food is such a fundamental need. And when that need becomes increasingly difficult to meet, it just ripples out into all these other areas of our lives.
It's like that old saying, you are what you eat.
Right.
But maybe it's also true that you are how you shop for your food.
Ooh.
Like, he reveals so much about our values and our priorities and just like our relationship with the world around us.
I love that reframing.
Yeah.
It really challenges us to look beyond the surface and to
Yeah.
think about like those deeper implications
Yeah.
of our choices, both individually and collectively.
So where do we go from here? Is this just like an inevitable clash between generations? Or is there a way to like bridge this gap and find some common ground?
Well, I'm an optimist, so I think we can find that common ground.
Yeah.
And I think it starts with recognizing that each generation has these valuable insights and experiences to offer.
Okay, so instead of like pitting Gen Z's tech savviness against Gen X's pragmatism,
Right.
what if we saw them as like these complementary strengths?
Exactly. Imagine the possibilities if like Gen Z could teach Gen X about those inflation tracking apps or help them, navigate online grocery shopping.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, Gen X could share their hard-earned wisdom about things like meal planning or preserving food or even like finding the best deals at the local farmers markets.
Like a generational knowledge swap,
Yeah.
a recipe for like collective resilience.
I love that it's really about recognizing that we're all in this together. We're facing these same challenges, and we can learn from each other's successes and struggles.
But let's be real, those generational tensions are out there.
Oh, yeah.
We've all seen the memes about avocado toast and side parts.
Of course, those differences exist, and they can lead to those misunderstandings and stereotypes. But, instead of focusing on those divides, what if we focused on, like, those shared values that unite us?
Like a desire for affordable, nutritious food, for a system that's fair and sustainable, for a future where everyone has access to the food that they need to thrive.
Exactly. We might disagree on the how, but the why is something I think that we can all agree on.
Yeah.
And that shared purpose can be this powerful starting point for building bridges and finding solutions.
So maybe this generational grocery gap
Yeah.
isn't a chasm, but like a bridge in disguise?
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It really challenges us to see this not as a source of division,
Right.
but as an opportunity for connection and collaboration.
And who knows, maybe that collaboration will lead to some delicious results.
Ooh, I love that.
We'll be back after a quick message with some final thoughts to chew on.
Yes.
Don't go away. All right, we are back. And, we've been talking this whole time about this idea of a generational grocery gap, how Gen Z and Gen X are facing these rising food prices. But they're doing it in their own very distinct ways.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be really easy to just be like, well, that's just Gen Z, that's just Gen X. But I think what's so fascinating is that they both want a lot of the same things.
They do.
We've been talking about how Gen Z is using all this tech. They're doing the DIY solutions, and Gen X is like, no, we're going old school. We're going to budget.
Yeah.
But like underneath it all, they both want affordability.
Yes.
They both want value, and they both want a sense of control in a system that can feel really unpredictable.
Right. I mean, they're both feeling the squeeze on their budgets. They're both, concerned about the future. And they both want to make sure that they can put, healthy, delicious food on the table for themselves and their families.
So instead of like focusing on all those differences, what if we like use this as a chance to learn from each other?
That's where it gets exciting,
Right.
Imagine if those tech-savvy Gen Zers could help, their Gen X parents or whoever navigate online grocery shopping.
Yeah.
Or show them how to use those inflation tracking apps. And then Gen X can kind of, impart some of that wisdom around meal planning and preserving food and, even like finding the best deals at those local farmers markets.
It's a two-way street.
It is.
It's like this generational knowledge swap.
Exactly. And we hear so much about generational divides,
Yeah.
But this is a chance to turn that divide into a bridge
Totally.
where Gen Z can benefit from that experience and that resilience of Gen X.
Yeah.
And then Gen X can tap into, the innovation and the tech skills of Gen Z.
It's not just about, individual families or communities either, right?
Right.
This kind of collaboration could have a ripple effect on the whole food system.
Absolutely. By combining these different approaches and these different perspectives, we can start to create a much more resilient and equitable and sustainable food system that benefits everyone.
So I think that's our challenge to you, dear listener. What can you do to bridge this gap in your own life?
Yeah, maybe it's starting a conversation with someone from a different generation about, their grocery shopping habits, what they struggle with, what they, where they feel successful. You might be surprised by what you learn.
Totally. And I think, at the end of the day, we all have a stake in this.
We do.
We all need to eat,
Yeah.
and we deserve a food system that works for us, not against us.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe by breaking down those generational barriers and really embracing each other's strengths, we can create a future where everyone has access to good food, regardless of, their age or background.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We hope you found it insightful. We hope you found it inspiring. Keep those conversations going.
Yeah.
And remember, there's more that unites us than divides us, even in the grocery aisle.